Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. And friends, I am really excited for today. For today, we are talking about the continuing story of Darth Maul and Sauvage Opress in some of the best episodes of Clone Wars, Season 5, Episodes 14, 15, and 16. All that and more after this commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm joined as always for Clone Wars discussions by Sarah and Riki. How are you folks doing tonight?
Hello. We are doing well.
She doesn't want me to sing along to the intro Star Wars-esque music. See, I actually listen to this podcast. So I know that there's fake music there that's like not copyright, but adjacent. Well, it's actually designed.
I haven't given him credit in a while, but our music is written by a great man named Jack Hess. His credits are on our webpage.
Jack.
Jack is a magic judge. That's how he's actually the person who got me into magic judging. So he's the reason why I got to know you all.
Oh, thanks, Jack.
Fun connection. Yeah, he does awesome music writing in his spare time. Definitely check it out.
I listened to our very first episode, and then I haven't listened to any of this because I just can't. I can't stand the sound of my own voice. Please don't write in emails about how you can't stand the sound of my voice either. Thank you.
I understand. I have listened to my own voice and your voice and Riki's voice and all my other guests' voice many, many times by now, and you just kind of eventually start tuning all of it out when you're editing it all. But
that's fair.
Our listeners don't want to hear about all the making of the sausage. They want to hear about these episodes. I'm going to give some plot summaries in a bit, but let me just start by kind of your general feeling. You all are as excited about these episodes to talk about as I am, right?
I mean, I'm excited. I don't know if I'm as excited as you are. You seem very excited.
This is the best arc in the entire series.
Ooh, big words.
Yeah. So let me give a quick plot summary for those of you who haven't seen it or just haven't seen it in a while. It's 3 episodes, but it's one story, so we're going to talk about it as one story. And it starts with Darth Maul and Sauvage Opress, his brother, form an alliance with a Mandalorian terrorist group, Death Watch, led by Pre Vizsla of the Vizsla clan. And they basically make a plan to help get the Vizslas and Death Watch back in power over Mandalore by kind of, destabilizing it so that Death Watch can ride to the rescue. And to do that, they build alliances with several of the crime syndicates, including the Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, and the Hutt Cartel. And in order to take over Mandalore, but it's also very clear that the one thing that Maul, Opress, and Pre Vizsla all have in common is they all hate Obi-Wan Kenobi. So the alliance gets built and the crime people start attacking the city and attacking Mandalore, which makes the existing government look weak. And so it allows Pre Vizsla to come along and say, look how weak she is. She can't stop this crime. Only I can stop the crime. And he's successful in that. He kind of takes over. He imprisons the Duchess. But all along, both Maul and Vizsla have been planning to betray each other. Vizsla does the first betraying, arrests Maul, but then Maul realizes, after Opress helps him get out of jail, that according to Mandalorian law, if anyone challenges Pre Vizsla to a duel, the winner of that duel will rule Death Watch and thus rule Mandalore. Maul does this, and no surprise, the Force user defeats the non-Force user, even though they have an epic lightsaber battle, because Vizsla at this point has the dark saber, and Maul wins and takes control of Death Watch and thus of Mandalore. And now the Black Saber. So in the 3rd episode, we get Obi-Wan to come to Mandalore with news of Satine's capture. The Jedi have a scene where, of course, they can't intervene because Mandalore is neutral. And there's kind of this, if only Satine had not been neutral, but now he can't. But, of course, Obi-Wan being Obi-Wan, and he certainly is not in love with Satine, because that's not what a Jedi would do. He just rushes to her side whenever she's in trouble. Infiltrates Mandalore, but ends up captured herself. Maul winds up murdering Satine in front of Obi-Wan in a kind of beautiful, not horrible, but in terms of the manipulation level, clearly trying to push Obi-Wan into rage, into vengeance, into the dark side. But Obi-Wan is rescued by Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan has been on the side of Pre Vizsla this whole time, but was horrified when Maul killed him and did not want to go along with Maul. So she's now trying to help Satine again, or help Obi-Wan. It is revealed that Bo-Katan was Satine's sister. Very important detail there. And then her Death Watch faction, there's a civil war against Maul. All of this captures the attention of Darth Sidious, meanwhile, Maul's former master, who's like, no, all this kind of happening in the dark side of the Force, we're not going to have this. So in the Mandalorian throne room, Sidious kills Oppress, takes Maul prisoner, hinting that he has something in mind for him. And I believe it ends with Obi-Wan is definitely freed, and him and Bo-Katan are able to... I think we end with it with them back in control of Mandalore, but that part I was not entirely clear on.
No, it ends. Obi-Wan leaves, and Mandalore is in a state of civil war.
But
right.
So Pre Vizsla and Maul have only been sort of like shadow leaders. The former Prime Minister was reinstated as the quote-unquote official leader of Mandalore. Alnek, yeah.
Right. Who you may remember him from a couple seasons ago. He was the one who was involved with...
Selling poison to children?
Yeah, selling poison to children, the black market to try and keep the economy going. He tried to justify it to himself, etc., etc. So what do you like so much about these episodes?
Obi-Wan in love. I mean,
I think they're just like really tight episodes. We even commented like there's some really great action scenes, and normally like we're not super into like the pew pew fighty scenes, but these were like
you're into the.
Sometimes I'm not into the bush bush, but this was like it was really well done and really like heightened the tension. I think, especially the last battle where Sidious comes in dual wields and and just like destroys Maul and Oppress, and is like and we get to see groveling Maul. Like he goes from this position of, I think he at one point does call Oppress brother, or at least calls him by his name, but goes back to like apprentice. He's very much in power. Maul is like clowning on Pre Vizsla, right? He has got this stuff on lock, and then Sidious gets there, and he turns into this like groveling mess where he actually is begging for his life at one point. And just to see like how much power Sidious has was really satisfying in this like epic battle as well. Like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, they keep doing this one-up of showing one very powerful group or person, and then the other just, like you said, clowns them, and then that person gets clowned by someone else, and up another ladder. Like you, I'm not a big fight person. Like, lightsaber battles can look awesome, but generally I'm not like, oh, that fight scene was so great. One of the first things that happens is when Maul and Savage Opress are dealing with Black Sun, the one group of leaders of Black Sun wants nothing to do with them. And so Oppress just throws his double-bladed lightsaber, the light staff, basically, and it's spinning. And it just decapitates everyone on both sides of the table. And it makes no sense whatsoever, but it looks amazing. And it was just such a perfect, like, sinister, powerful, like, yeah, this is why everyone lines up behind these guys, because they'll do anything and they can pull it off.
Yeah. I didn't realize he decapitated both sides of the table. I saw the main guy get decapitated, but I wasn't paying attention to the heads of everyone else, because there was like
all the other bodies like just slumped down with their like no heads on their bodies.
Huh.
Yeah, and so Black Sun, the criminal organization, people may be familiar with. There was a video game called Shadows of the Empire, and I believe there may have been a book and/or comic book also published parallel to it. I think it was on the Super Nintendo. And it introduced this organization, Black Sun. This is in the Imperial period, I think, right after The Empire Strikes Back.
Right. Where
Leia and Chewbacca go undercover as bounty hunters. And this is where she starts wearing the Bouche disguise. And they infiltrate Black Sun.
And people who've only seen the movies will remember Black Sun and Maul's involvement with them, because I believe that's one of the key twists at the end of Solo, is that because they've been involved kind of...
That organization was called Crimson Dawn. Yeah. Which is similar.
Oh, okay. No, you're right. I get those two confused.
I don't know how. Yeah.
And then there's also Dark Moon. No, there's not.
There's not. But I mean, it's still... Black Sun is a much better name than Death Watch.
Yeah, that's true. Death Watch is it's not good PR.
It's a little on the nose.
Better marketing.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of bad PR, so one of the things that happens here is after Death Watch takes control, they imprison Duchess Satine, and Pre Vizsla is talking about executing her. And Bo-Katan, at this point, we're not supposed to know that they're sisters.
Right.
But she should have said something, right?
Yeah, Bo-Katan seems very chill with this plan of, like, murdering her sister.
Well, I wanted to talk more about her because I think, especially for many of our listeners, they may not have really seen Bo-Katan until we get introduced to her in Mandalorian, in which she's definitely like a hero figure. She's one of the people who, joins up with Din. And certainly she's appeared in other properties that may get discussed going forward. But in this, I feel like this is what we're kind of showing is that this is very much her, where she starts from and then where she's going. And the sense that I got of it is that, we kind of know that Pre Vizsla mostly wants power for power's sake, but that the message that he's giving of the Mandalorians used to be this proud warrior race, and Satine and people like her have kind of, betrayed the honor and the history and the legacy of Mandalorian culture, and so she's responsible for everything wrong, that the people who follow him have definitely bought into that hook, line, and sinker. Mm. And, Bo-Katan is so visibly upset at the death of Pre Vizsla that I guess my take on it was that she is so bought into what he's saying that it's that kind of like, well, yes, you're my sister, but you've betrayed, you're a traitor to our world and a traitor to our cause. And so I don't think she's fine with just like casually murdering Satine, but I think she believes Vizsla's lies that Satine was, caught trying to commit treason and win back power, and so she deserves to be executed.
Yeah. And she does say when, like, Corky gets Bo-Katan to come with him to go meet up with Satine, and Satine's kind of like, why are you here? Her reasoning is that, we have a common enemy now. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, yeah, I don't know. It does seem weird, though, that she wouldn't be like, hey, that's my sister. And I guess, like, we're preserving that for the reveal at the end of the third episode. But
which apparently they weren't certain if they even wanted to reveal that. I mean, they knew that relationship existed, but I think I read that the writers went back and forth on whether they explicitly wanted Obi-Wan to say that at the end.
Yeah.
That's fair.
When he finds out about it, what he says to her as he's walking onto the ship is, "I'm so sorry." Yeah. Which I loved because it's so clearly, it must have been a callback. It's exactly what he says as he's walking away to Padme once he realizes that, he says, "Is Anakin the father of your child?" And she just kind of like looks down and acknowledges it. And he says, "I'm so sorry," in that exact way. So I just love that little moment there.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. There was a couple of other callbacky kind of phrases. But
let's stick with Bo-Katan for just another few minutes. Because I think it's a really interesting character moment for her, and I think interesting to discuss further. I guess my only other thing with the whole thing about her sister is, if you're trying to get high up in an organization that's dedicated to overthrowing what they see as a corrupt government, I'm guessing you might not want to reveal the fact that you're connected to the people in that government.
Yeah, that could be. Like, she's hiding it from Death Watch itself, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Maybe? I don't know there. Maybe it would have been clear and there'd be no way to hide that, or maybe it was just she doesn't want to acknowledge that. She's
got, like, feelings and...
Yeah.
Would want... Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. It is, like, to kind of metagame on Bo-Katan a bit. Like, she's voiced by Katie Sackhoff, who's a big name in the sci-fi world. So I think, like, the idea of Bo-Katan being an important character, even if they didn't reveal that she was the sister of Satine, it is probably still there. Like, obviously we know she's important. She's been on The Mandalorian. She's been in other things, as you'd mentioned. But yeah, I think there's no hiding that Bo-Katan is an important figure. But yeah, that's explicitly linking her as Satine's sister maybe isn't entirely necessary? I don't know. Or, like, revealing it, at least.
That's fair.
So one of the things that I thought when I was watching this is that Bo-Katan might be, I don't know, I guess a Mandalorian supremacist. Because, like, she takes offense to the murder of Pre Vizsla.
Right.
But it was an honorable, like, quote unquote, legal duel, right, according to their traditions. Right. So most of the other members of Death Watch are like, yeah, okay, Maul's our leader now. Like, he won the trial by combat. And she is very much against it and explicitly says, like, an outsider will never sit on the throne of Mandalore or something along those lines.
Right.
So she just immediately, like, turns on them because of that. So I think there's something there where, like, she believes in, like, Mandalore for Mandalorians only.
Right. And, like, Death Watch's whole motto does seem very, like, Mandalorian heritage above all else.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and this is something, and we're mostly just talking about the Clone Wars, but obviously part of why we're excited talking about these stories is because these characters are getting referenced again, and in Bo-Katan's case, appearing again in the TV show The Mandalorian. And in that show, we have it established that Din, our hero, is part of this sort of offshoot group that also, had high levels of reverence for this Mandalorian culture and Mandalorian honor and things like that. One that Bo-Katan was kind of dismissive of. But I love getting to see these parts of Bo-Katan again because I don't know if she's going to be included in future seasons. I really hope she is. But I would love it if we would get to have, like, a scene of Bo-Katan, like, telling Din a different version of Mandalorian history than the one he's been raised with. And getting to hear, like, how much does she still hold to these ideas? Because you're right, Riki, at this point, she's very much, like, only Mandalorian. And you can see it, I think, as supremacist, or you can see it as very just, like, no outsiders. Like, we don't want to be colonized. But even so, I'd love to see, like, have her views changed? And how does she talk about Death Watch? And how does that connect to the group that Din is a part of? I think that all can just be such interesting parts of the Mandalorian story.
Yeah, what's odd to me is that both Bo and Pre Vizsla, their vision for Mandalore seems to be, like, very isolationist. Because that's what causes the conflict between Vizsla and Maul, is that Maul wants to use Mandalore as a base of operations to manipulate the other neutral systems that Mandalore rules over or whatever, as part of an alliance with. Right. And Pre Vizsla's like, no, we're not going to do that anymore. I have Mandalore. I only care about Mandalore. You go do your thing in the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, he's like, we'll kill Obi-Wan, but we're good now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely have very different goals, and I think you're right that and to some extent that's across Mandalore. I mean, even Satine has been very, vigilant about the idea that she will not join either the Separatists or the Republic. And the Jedi are still grumpy about that, clearly, because that's why they can't send any aid to help her.
Well, yeah, that's why they say they can't send any aid to help her, but yeah.
But the thing is, like, under Satine, Mandalore is still a part of the Republic, ? Right? She's a senator.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And she is part of this alliance of neutral systems, which is, I guess, like a third faction in the galactic politics. And I get the impression that Pre Vizsla didn't like even that. And, like, if he had seen his plans to fruition, they would have just withdrawn completely from all of it.
Yeah, well, Satine's motto, or, like, end goal, is very, like, peace-oriented. Not necessarily staying out of everyone's business, but just, like, not engaging in conflict, right? And that's why, like, Almec and Pre Vizsla too are using that sort of, like, oh, she puts peace above all else and is therefore putting all of Mandalore in danger. That's what they use to get the people of Mandalore to chant a variety of things throughout these episodes. Right. Was one thing we noticed was, like, there's a lot of people just hanging around ready to chant whatever on Mandalore. Yeah. Like, good for them.
Every time either Pre Vizsla or Almec gives a speech, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people chanting their name.
Yeah.
It's like, don't you have jobs?
I did think that there was some interesting messaging happening there. Because, again, remember when the Clone Wars was happening in the mid-2000s and all the sort of discussion and critique of the Iraq wars and the security apparatus that was being set up. And I mean, a key part of this is the idea that this group creates a fake crisis in order to scare people enough that they're willing to basically accept fashion, like a military dictatorship again.
Yeah, it's absolutely
very like, okay, there's some commentary on world events happening here.
The visuals of those scenes where the people are chanting is very fascist.
Yeah,
is very Nazi Germany. But that's the weird thing, is that after taking control, like Pre Vizsla's plans don't include like conquering other people. Right.
Yeah, he doesn't want a Mandalorian empire. He just wants, like I said, Mandalore for Mandalores.
Fun little note. Pre Vizsla's voiced by Jon Favreau, which I think we may have mentioned when we first...
Oh, yes, that's right.
Encountered Pre Vizsla, but also nobody seems to be able to pronounce Pre Vizsla correctly. Like, there's
yeah, that's why I chuckled earlier, because multiple characters, I think, like Vizsla...
Pre Vizsla was like the narrator introduces them, and you're just like... We need like a pronunciation guide of voice actors. Yeah.
Well, and his name is one of those where I get that we're trying to push the idea that the Star Wars universe doesn't have the same naming conventions as ours. Their galaxy doesn't have the same naming conventions. But like, honestly, the first couple times I heard this character's name, I thought what it meant was that he was like the first Vizsla. He was the one who went before the rest of the Vizslas. He was pre-Vizslas.
And then there'd be his son post-Vizsla.
Well, no, that would have been if Obi-Wan had been present when he died. That's the joke he would have made.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I guess he's post-Vizsla now.
We did have a moment, which is like, I think I've gone on record many times as saying no moment is inappropriate for sass for Obi-Wan Kenobi. We found one, right? Like when Satine was murdered in front of him. He was legit wrecked.
Come on.
Well, I know, but like to see that side of Obi-Wan is like refreshing, kind of nice. Like he has been so detached, which I think is where this like sarcastic, like I would have made a post-Vizsla kind of joke is coming from. But like just to see how much he was attached to Satine is nice and kind of pulls him back into this like the same venue as like Anakin with Anakin's attachments, right? And we're seeing that he's using maybe this sarcasm as a way of putting up a barrier in front of this idea of attachment.
Yeah, I think it's very accurate. I want to ask one more quick Satine question, and then let's go deep into the Obi-Wan of it all, because I think that's honestly one of the best parts of this whole arc. Because we talked about how Satine is really dedicated to peace. Now, more recently, people started talking about the idea of like the danger of tolerating intolerance, and of sort of like allowing folks coming into the public square preaching fascism or Nazism or whatever, and like, that letting that happen can be really dangerous sometimes. Satine basically just stands there while Vizsla shows up and gives this speech about how she's awful and terrible and needs to be overthrown, and lying like crazy about how, he should be allowed to take over. Should she have stopped him?
Does she know he's lying like crazy? Like, she doesn't know that he's in league with the crime syndicates, does she?
That's true. But he's certainly making a case for overthrowing her right in front of her.
Oh, sure. But I think she's very, like, she even says after she's been captured, like, it's the will of the people or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, she should have called for an election.
Yeah, instead of just letting him straight up overthrow her.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting scene. I think it's meant to sort of show that she's just very passive. And I definitely like, I don't want her to be like, okay, no one can challenge my rule, deaf to you, but definitely I think there was a powerful moment there of like him challenging her and her just having no response. And that's part of why the people turn to him.
Speaking of no response, I just thought it was very sad. In her dying moments, she admits her feelings for Obi-Wan and says, I love you, I've always loved you, or something like, I will always love you. And he can't say it back. And that was just very sad to me, because we know that's how he feels. But even in her dying moments, he won't say it out loud.
I feel like he wouldn't say it with words, but we saw him like caress her cheek as he's holding her in a way that is very, like that's not a Jedi platonic, like, let me make you feel better kind of a touch. You're right. I think I wish he would have said it with words, But I think he also is very clearly saying it in the way that he can.
Yeah, he's too, like, emotionally stunted? I don't know if that's the right word to, like, be able to say it out loud.
Didn't want to say it in front of his bronemy.
No, like, not even that. I feel like he does not, well, I don't think anybody outside of Satine exists for him in that moment, right? Like, he's not really that concerned about what Maul thinks about him in that moment. Mm-hmm. He's just, like, devastated.
Do you think that he's maybe never admitted it to himself until that moment? Because he's supposed to be, like, the Jedi, he's the one always reminding Anakin not to grow too attached. He's always sort of tried to play it off that he's not interested in Satine the way she is. Although clearly we've always known that that's farcical.
Yeah. Well,
do you think that he's always known he won't admit it, or that maybe that's the moment when he has to recognize his feelings himself?
I'm gonna go with the first one. Like, he even talks about how he would have left the Jedi Academy for her in like previous episodes. So maybe not love, but he definitely knows that he's got big feelings for her. Mm-hmm. And like he's even coming to Mandalore. Like, he's not supposed to be here. He's just showing up because he's got to go help her. Like, this is the callback where she, like, basically, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I would really like your help, right? She doesn't go to, like, you're my only hope, which would have been nice, too on the nose. I don't know. But yeah, she doesn't call and ask the Jedi for help. She calls and asks Obi-Wan for help. And he shows up.
Well, last time she called the Jedi, they sent Ahsoka. So she
had
had to be
much more
specific.
Padme, do not forget Ahsoka, yeah.
I think maybe the reason Obi-Wan doesn't say I love you back, is because he can't control, he doesn't want to lose control of his emotions. And that's like, that's like a barrier or a dam. If he says I love you and she dies, I think then he goes into like a death wail and like summons the Force and like turns to the dark side. Like, that's a possibility. And I feel like he had to stop himself there, stop short.
Well, especially because, are we in agreement that what you just described is exactly what Maul is hoping for? That's why Maul does this, and like, he does this thing of like having Satine run to Obi-Wan, and then he sort of puts out the sword and like kills her right in front of Obi-Wan, while Obi-Wan's powerless to stop him. Like, I think, I think that actually might be the best explanation, is he knows that Maul is doing all of this for exactly that reason, to bring out his feelings, and so that even that alone is like, I have to stop this.
Yeah, and he, Maul makes his join the dark side, we have cookies speech to him. And Obi-Wan, like, says something about how it's easy to join the dark side. Like, it's easy to give in to those feelings of hate and of anger, and that's not powerful. What's powerful is being able to turn down the draw to the dark side. And he's strong enough to say no, basically. Which I thought was, like, a good retort, a good speech. Like, this idea of turning down the call to power.
Right. Well, I mean, that is at the heart of it, the whole point of the Jedi belief that attachments are wrong, is that if you're attached to something, the loss of it can send you towards the dark side.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like ultimately what broke Anakin, right? It was this idea of the possibility of losing Padme.
Right.
Which is really, I think, is more the possibility of don't you dare. I think it was really the possibility of losing control over the situation, less than like losing Padme herself. But still, this idea of of having attachments to people, being your downfall. But still, like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, with Anakin, I think, Anakin's basically a case study in toxic masculinity, and just sort of every kind of toxic masculine idea of, like you said, wanting control, wanting to sort of have the image of the protector, that like, I must protect my woman and my child, and that, like, all of that I think is wrapped up with Anakin. And you're right, it's not just love, it's like his self-image and his sense of control and all of that.
And the Jedi are also instilling in him this, like, it is not okay to show your feelings, which is another really prominent facet of this, like, toxic masculinity. Yeah, so he's the whole package, whether or not it was entirely his doing or like it came from external sources. But yeah, a little of both.
Mm-hmm. So what other, do we have any other thoughts on kind of the romance that we get between Satine and Obi-Wan? We've known this was coming for a while, obviously. Not death necessarily, but this is kind of the culmination of this slow burning flirtation that's been coming for a long time.
It was really missing an end cap.
Mm-hmm.
It was missing a moment where he, like, a quiet moment where he's remembering her. I felt like.
Like, you mean at the end of the episode you wanted something?
Yeah, like maybe like after he gets back to the Jedi Temple, he has a picture of her on his desk. Or something like an object that reminds him of her.
A hologram that includes her holding up the device that's capturing her hologram.
Yeah. And a single tear rolls down his cheek.
And then it turns to a snowflake. No, that's Batman the Animated Series. Matthew, I think the line that you pointed out where he says, "I'm so sorry" to Bo-Katan kind of stands in for that moment that you're talking about. Like,
right.
He's not just apologizing to Bo-Katan that her sister is dead, right? It's not like a my condolences on the loss of your sister. It's part of that. But I think it's also this, like, I'm so sorry that I couldn't save her.
It's not just that he couldn't save her. He's the reason she died.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they wanted to get to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's actually really well put.
That's the tragedy of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he knows that. But I also think that there's something there of he can't acknowledge his own pain. He can only acknowledge hers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's classic superhero theory, right, Matthew? Right. That the reason the superheroes have secret identities is they don't want the villains to know who they can get to.
Right. I mean, that's the speech Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man gives to, is it Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy in the Tobey Maguire movie?
Yeah, it's Mary Jane.
Mary Jane. It's what Harry tells Ginny in, Harry Potter. Like, yeah, it's this always idea of you'll be a vulnerability against me, which is kind of problematic in a whole bunch of ways, but it's definitely the thing. It's to avoid exactly this moment.
Do you think this is like, in Obi-Wan's mind, like a driving home of the idea that we shouldn't have attachments as Jedi?
Probably.
I was thinking about this in terms of what Riki said about the end cap, and this is the problem that I always have when you go back and do things that are set before something that's already been made, which is this story is so beautiful and such an essential part of who Obi-Wan is that now the fact that is never mentioned or discussed, or we never see Obi-Wan thinking about it during the movie Revenge of the Sith, when Obi-Wan is figuring out what's happening between Anakin and Padme, just feels all the more wrong, And like, there's no way, of course, they can go back and like put that in, but like that, to me, that would be one of the perfect time. You need an end cap here, but also there would have been some reference to it there, of Obi-Wan saying like, Anakin, I know where this can lead to, or Anakin throwing in his face of like, why was it, I don't want to lose her the way you lost Satine, something like that's what he would have said on Mustafar. But yeah, no, we know because
by the way, we get a little Mustafar in this arc.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which always
explain that for those who haven't seen it.
Oh,
what Mustafar is?
It's the lava planet where
what happens in these episodes.
Oh,
sure.
It was one of the headquarters of the crime syndicates. Which is it? Black Sun? I think it was Black Sun.
Wasn't it the Pikes? No, was it both Black Sun and the Pikes?
No, the Pikes have their own planet.
Okay,
somewhere, Kessel maybe. I think it was Black Sun. I think they had their base on there. Precariously perched over a river of lava.
As you do.
Yeah, because seems safe.
That's the place to go,
There was like a big cutscene of them like going to and getting various crime families together, so I think like the reason we're confused as to like who they got from Mustafar.
We didn't even mention I maybe briefly mention that they get the huts as well. They threaten the huts and it works.
So they go to Nal Hutta, as you do, and like they're trying to get information out of the huts, and one of the huts tells them like Jabba is at Jabba's palace
on Tatooine.
And like Maul seems to already know that and is just like, why would you tell us this? And then kills him. And it's like, why would you go there asking if you already knew? Like, this isn't his fault. But yeah.
The feeling I got there was that Maul was trying to cover up for the fact that he was clearly being an idiot. He was that like,
all right.
Of course I knew that. Why wouldn't I? Didn't know that, but of course I knew that. You know,
that's fair.
And we get a bunch of nice bounty hunter moments.
Mm-hmm.
Dengar and Embo are there. Embo being the guy who has the big hat, the metal hat that he throws like Captain America's shield,
and the puppy. It's not a puppy, but he's got like a little companion. Little animal companion. Who
apparently in the credits, Embo is voiced by Dave Filoni, which I don't think he actually says anything, but he grunts a couple times during the fight. Great job.
So you have Favreau and Filoni together on screen. I like it.
Delightful. Were they ever together on screen? Probably at some point. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Then... go ahead.
I wrote in my notes that I do love a getting the band together montage, which is kind of how it felt, as they went from like, criminal gang to criminal gang, like, hey, can you join us? Oh, no? Okay, we'll kill those group of leaders. Hey, do you want to join us? Yes, we do. Great. Next group,
Yeah, and it was fun to check in. Like, we saw Embo in the cube, where, Moralo Evol tested them all. So it was nice to like, see. There was another bounty hunter who we saw in the Seven Samurai episode. She was there. Yeah, mm-hmm. So it was fun to like check in on these characters without like getting necessarily bogged down with them. Just kind of like, hey, they're hanging out, they're here, which is I think another reason why these episodes are so good. Like we get a lot of character development from our main characters, but we also get to like kind of check in on some side characters who are fun, but we're not necessarily getting super invested in, and we don't need to be super invested in.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even talked much about Maul and Opress, and I feel like they, in some ways, got a ton of development, because here, in the past, we've seen them being very, like, brute force. Like, we have the big swords, we're really good at power. Here, they do much, like, on some level, I kind of wanted Palpatine to be a little bit proud of them, because basically what they're doing on Mandalore is a microcosm of exactly what Palpatine's trying to do to the whole Republic, of create this fake crisis so that you can ride in as the rescuer and convince the people to give you all the power. And I just loved seeing, like, and even Opress gets it. There's one moment where Maul's like, yes, you understand. Like, we manipulate them. We use their greed against them.
Yeah, Maul even says when Sidious comes to take care of business, like, he says, like, oh, master, I was using all the things that you taught me to do this for you because I love you, which is clearly a lie, and Sidious called him out on it. But yeah, like, he is acting very politically sneaky. I think Opress is kind of the muscle for most of it until, like, Maul has to teach him what's going on. It's not really coming naturally. And we do get, like, physical development from them, right? Like, Maul's got new legs, thanks to Death Watch. Opress has a mechanical arm. So Maul's back to being shorter than Opress, which is fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Because, like,
I don't think it's a lie. Maul saying that he did it all
to impress Palpatine?
Yeah.
But he's been going on and on about how he and Opress are the only two true Sith, the rule of two, blurdy blur.
Yeah, I think if in that moment Sidious had said, "You've done well," and like called him his apprentice again and told him to get rid of Opress, he would have done it in a second.
Out of respect for Sidious or out of fear for Sidious?
I think he's got a very complex relationship with Sidious.
Yeah.
That is like, I mean, he raised him, right? Like, he's essentially his father.
Oh, yeah.
Not just, like, father figure. Like, he's his father in terms of, like, he was there growing up.
Yeah, well, he took him from the Night Sisters, right?
Yeah, as a little baby.
And so I do think, like, he's done everything to impress his father.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has to me that kind of, like, teenage rebellion where you might not even realize you're doing that on some conscious level, but yeah, there's definitely like, F you, Dad, I'm going to fight you, I'm going to do those things. Oh, you're proud of me? Now you love me, Dad? Oh, okay. Like, yeah. I think there's definitely some element of that.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the brilliances of these episodes is that Maul has been, obviously, like, big bad villain since he first appeared in Phantom Menace and all of this. They've been slaughtering Jedi, slaughtering people. I felt genuine sympathy for Maul when he's so clearly like, is like, Daddy, I want you to love me again. Look how good I am. And Palpatine's like, nope, you're a rival. I got to kill you and your brother.
I don't know if I felt sympathy for him. Empathy, maybe? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying. And yeah, I guess I didn't think of it that way, clearly. I thought he was trying to pull one over on Sidious. But that makes more sense, that he is trying to just, like, win him back, even if it's subconscious. Or, like, to make Daddy proud, like you said. Yeah. You're making a face, Riki.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, what? It was my theory.
It was my theory. I believe my own theory. Okay.
I do.
I believe your theory now, too. You've convinced me.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to comment on how powerful Sidious is from the moment he steps off of his shuttle. So he's confronted by 2 Death Watch guards. And they're like, you can't park that here. And normally when we see Sith force choke people, they have to make a hand gesture, right? Like, Darth Vader makes the classic, like, I'm choking you, hand gesture. Sidious makes a gesture, but he just, like, kind of subtly lifts his finger while he walks past these 2 people, and they start choking, and he gets on, like, a sky skiff to fly to the palace or whatever, and they're still choking in the background behind him. He's not even paying attention.
Yeah.
And again, like, during the fight, with Oppress and Maul, it's effortless for him. The killing blow on Oppress is just like so easy for him. Oppress is behind him, and Sidious is he like flips his sabers around to face backwards and just like runs backwards into Oppress. Again, like doesn't even look at him.
Yeah, and I think it's such a contrast to Palpatine, who has this kind of like frail old man thing going on. Like he's not especially old, but he does act a little like
he plays it up.
He's like he'll like grab Anakin's arm when he's walking and like kind of lean on him a little bit, which again is like playing up the relationship. But he was like doing backflips and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, which honestly, like, he kind of reminded me of Yoda, like Yoda's fighting style of flips and stuff.
Parkour.
But then also parkour. This like, pardon?
The force parkour.
Force parkour. Yeah. And I thought that was like a neat, because they're sort of these like opposite poles of the force, right?
Right. I think you're right. And I think there's one other thing about Sidious's power that we see, and here it's actually when he is Palpatine, which is that Obi-Wan finds out about what's going on because, like, Satine gets him a message. With Palpatine, he just senses this disturbance in the Force from, like, many, many star systems, light years away. And I think Yoda's the only one we've seen who kind of has that power. So I thought that was also a really good moment of just us really starting to see, first of all, we're not hiding anything anymore. Palpatine is Sidious, Sidious is Palpatine. But just showing that he can feel that from all the way far away and know, okay, I got to go to Mandalore is a pretty scary moment for just seeing what he can do.
Yeah, and this isn't some sort of like mass extinction like what we see on Alderaan, where there's 1,000 lives being lost at once or millions of lives being lost at once. It's just like this subtle power shift that Palpatine / Sidious is picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you think he sensed? Was it Maul growing in power? Was it Obi-Wan? Like, did he sense Obi-Wan's, I don't know, grief and, like, almost falling to the dark side?
The impression I got is that he sensed kind of Maul and Oppress, kind of like you said, coming into their power. I think is this the first time that we hear Maul refer to them as the new Lords of the Sith? Because I thought in the past he had sort of said, we're going to set up our own thing. But here, when Vizsla asks, are you the Sith? He's like, yes, we are.
Well, Vizsla questions the rule of 2. He's like, I thought there were only ever 2 Sith. And he's basically like, You're looking at him?
That's us.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's just preading.
Yeah. But I wonder, like, that could be what Palpatine... Because am I right that until now, Maul and Oppress have been talking about doing a different dark side thing, but not necessarily being Sith?
Yeah, like a brand new dark side. A kinder, gentler dark side. That's not right.
No.
But,
Yeah,
a different...
the Sith, not trying to
exactly.
take them over.
They're exactly right. They don't want anything to do with the Sith. Although they are still in this power dynamic of master and apprentice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Maul continually referring to Oppress as his apprentice, as so much so that like he doesn't call him brother. He only calls him Oppress like when they wake up in the Death Watch camp and they're like on surgical tables. I think he says like Oppress.
Yeah.
Or like Savage maybe. I don't know. But he calls him by his name, but then back to that, it's just like, apprentice. Yeah. But that seems more like a power play versus a sticking to Sith doctrine.
Yeah. Hierarchy is going to hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that part's pretty clear.
Yeah. I thought it was in reaction to like Obi-Wan's pain at Satine's death, but it could just be just Maul's presence in general. Like you guys have said, he is like a son to Palpatine. Or like, do you think Palpatine views him like a son, or is it just Maul that views Palpatine like a father?
Palpatine doesn't care about anyone.
Other than Palpatine? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah. Especially, I think Palpatine may have had some feelings of affection towards Maul, but kind of that same Anakin way of like, this is my creation, and so I'm proud of him. And so I think once Maul failed, Palpatine wanted nothing more to do with him.
Yeah, viewing apprentices as tools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Maul is no longer useful, and also now Maul makes me look bad instead of Maul making me look good.
Yeah.
Which earlier in this season, when Maul and Oppress were first going on their rampage, and the Jedi Council was like, "Should we do something?" Chancellor Palpatine was like, "Nah, don't worry about it. They're just doing petty criminal things." Like, that came back to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was like, time. Yeah. Yeah. It almost felt like he was just like crack his knuckles, like, time to go take out the trash.
Do you think that maybe on some level he was hoping that they would, like, mess with the Jedi somewhat, or just generally add more to the whole chaos that he wants to have happen to speed him to more and more power?
I don't necessarily think so, because the induction of chaos seems to be quite controlled from Palpatine's perspective. Like what we saw at the Cube, and this idea of like having this bounty hunter tournament thing. Right. Right? Like even that seemed like Palpatine had quite a good grasp as to what was going on there. Mm-hmm. How much of it was premeditated and how much of it was just him going with the flow is like, I think, up for debate. But I don't think he would have knowingly let Savage and Maul muck around so powerfully, I guess. Because, like, right. if they do become a genuine threat against Palpatine, like, that's a big problem. And I think he knows that Maul could get there. Or, like, maybe he didn't and was genuinely surprised by this uprising.
Yeah, he doesn't want chaos. I mean, what you refer to as chaos is all controlled by him. Mm-hmm. Like, he's moving both sides of the chessboard. And so, like, having a, like, instead of a white pawn and a black pawn, having, like, this red pawn show up on your board is like, that's not the game I'm playing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair. I did feel like I get this not the story they told, but a part of me wanted to have Dooku there as well, just because you have so many interesting dynamics there of Savage having worked for Dooku at one point, and then, Dooku abandoning Savage, but also Dooku basically being the one who replaces Maul. And so I kind of missed him a little bit, but I also understand why it was just Palpatine was like, no, I don't want to mess around with anyone else. I just want to go take care of this myself.
Yeah.
Well, I have good news for you, Matthew. There was some scripts written following this up, like what Palpatine is referring to as "I have plans for you" at the end to Maul. Mm-hmm. They never got filmed for the Clone Wars because it was canceled, and then like they had that weird lost season, and then it came back. But they did turn it into a comic book. Maul, cool. I think Maul, son of Dathomir. And it deals with Maul and Dooku actually face off against each other.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll definitely have to I'm not very good at reading comic books, but I'll definitely try to like find a wiki summary of it or something like that, because that sounds awesome.
I think he's a diehard comic book lover.
Yes. I know. Well, so I think those were the big points I wanted to hit. Any other big things from these episodes you all wanted to talk about?
Not big things. I have little funny commentary, and that's about it.
Go for it. I actually had one little realization as well, but you go first.
Ooh, okay. So the two things about planet names. Mandalore, whenever they're chanting, I wanted them to chant Mandalore, but in the Seinfeld, like, Mandelbaum tone. And we never got that, and I was sad. I just wanted some, like, Mandalore, because that's what I say in my brain every time. And Mustafar.
She also says it out loud.
Don't tell people. That was between you and me and the cat. And Mustafar, like, I always think of another thing that Tim Curry is involved in, perhaps his best work, Muppet Treasure Island, where Gonzo says they're going to Zanzibar to meet the Zanzibarbarians. I always think whenever we go to Mustafar, we're going to meet the Mustafarfarians.
His best work is Clue,
for those who don't
movie.
get it, this is the episode where Tim Curry takes over the voice of Emperor Palpatine.
Oh, yeah. We've he's done like a couple lines in a previous episode where we've seen Palpatine, but I think he's like officially credited here. And we see this as like in tribute to Ian Abercrombie, the previous voice of Palpatine, who had recently passed away.
Right.
And I think he does a great job. Like, you can definitely tell it's Tim Curry, but I mean, yeah, I think he does like a good job of it. We didn't notice for a while on our first watch through, and I think I pointed it out, and it was like, we had to look it up and be like, is that Tim Curry?
And I hate to say fortuitous, because it's sad that Ian Abercrombie passed away. Mm-hmm. But the transition between the two actors, I think, happened at a good point for this series, because I always thought Ian Abercrombie played an excellent Chancellor Palpatine. And then when we transitioned into seeing more of the Sidious role as we did in these episodes, Tim Curry just hams it up, and he's fantastic at that kind of thing.
I apparently I thought I was pretty good at recognizing voices. I had no idea it was Tim Curry until you all pointed it out. But even though we actually had talked about it beforehand, but I think he just is fantastic at that voice. Yeah, there was one line, and I think knowing that it was Tim Curry I was like, that's it, that's the Tim Curry. But yeah, it took me until like either later into this season or maybe even season 6 before I was like, is this Tim Curry? And it was. Yeah. So the cool little thing I noticed, ever since the Darksaber has appeared, it has always looked very weird to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And part of it is because it's not the same shape as a lightsaber. It's more like not a scimitar, but like it's like a wide flat blade, instead of just like the roundish almost saber.
Yeah, it's like a one side. Like it's only one side as quote unquote sharp, right?
Right. But the other thing is, because I'm not a very visual person, I feel like an idiot. It took me till now to realize it. It's because every other lightsaber is, at least it's animated, the cord of it is white, and then it has like an aura around it that it's a particular color. Mm-hmm. And so in your head, I would think like a Darksaber would be the same thing, but with a dark aura around it. And actually, no, it's the reverse. It's that the center of it is black and doesn't really shine the way the white one does. It's just a sort of like, black shape of a sword, and then there's like a white kind of shininess around it. So it's completely reversed in that way. And like I said, I'm not a visual person, but once I put that together, I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome, because it helps me understand, like, why does this look so different from every other lightsaber? Yeah, and I think it's such a cool look too, because like you pointed out, it's not how we expect light to act, right? Like that's not how light works. So to have the Darksaber look like that, it's almost as if kind of like a black hole effect, like the light is being like sucked away from it. It looks super cool. Mm-hmm. And I like that we get to sort of track its lineage a little more, right? Like now it's in Maul's hands. How does it get to Giancarlo Esposito? Well, and now that dynamic they talk about how Din wins the sword and so he rules Mandalore now. I like that we actually get to see that happening. You know, that's this idea of, because on some level you think Bo-Katan is kind of right. Like, in a weird way, it kind of reminds me actually a lot of Black Panther, and how in Black Panther, the movie, when Eric Killmonger comes along to want to challenge T'Challa for the throne, they won't let him. It's not just like anyone can get into combat. It's he has to prove, no, I actually am a son of Wakanda and I'm part of the royal family. That kind of gives me the right to challenge. And Bo-Katan has that same kind of idea. Like, she doesn't think anyone can challenge, but Maul, who is clearly not a Mandalorian, clearly not at all connected to them, he just wants to step up and challenge Vizsla, and by their rules, he gets to. And I just thought that was such an interesting... It to me, it really grounds a lot more of where Bo-Katan is coming from when she and Din have that discussion about the sword, so much later.
Yeah.
Well, I have two small things.
Go for it.
One of them is just a fun thing. I will chuckle every time Mandalorians fire the rockets from their backs because they had to do this funny bend over thing to do it.
Yep. It's like a deep bow.
And it's just, it's hilarious every time. The other thing is a real life thing. So the writer for these episodes, I looked him up, Chris Collins, because these, as I said, is probably my favorite arc. He also wrote the arc at the beginning of this season on the planet Onderon, where they were dealing with that rebellion and helping Saw Gerrera and his rebels. And so these two arcs this season written by Chris Collins have just been fantastic in my opinion. And it's unfortunate that these are actually the only episodes he wrote for this series. But in his other credits, he has worked on The Wire, Sons of Anarchy, and The Man in the High Castle, which all are very highly acclaimed shows. So
right.
I'm interested in maybe checking some of those out and keeping an eye on his name.
You definitely should. I am a huge... I think Sons of Anarchy is... I mean, it's Hamlet on motorbikes. It's much better acted than I ever thought it would be, and it's very fun, but it's also kind of trashy and great, but also some really interesting storytelling. The Wire, I think, is hands down the best television show that's ever been made. I just think it is amazing and so good on so many levels. But with both of them, there's an awful... And Man in the High Castle, I think this is also true of, there's so much moral complexity and so much moral grayness and all these moments of you're not really sure who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. And I love that we got some of that here, in terms of pre-Vizsla is obviously bad, but not as bad as, who is Bo-Katan siding with? And there's that one moment when they're in jail when Satine is talking to the prime minister. I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name. Almec, yeah, thank you. I was going to say Achik. Almec. And Almec's being somewhat self-serving, but he's also kind of right when he's talking about how Satine wanted just this perfect moral clarity of how she ruled Mandalore. And the fact was they needed a black market to some extent to survive. And he was cutting an awful lot of corners and doing terrible things and getting rich off it himself, for sure. But he's kind of look, Satine, you let Maul take over. You let Pre-Vizsla take over, and he's not wrong. And I love that scene because I felt like they were both making valid points, even though they couldn't hear each other. And so I love what you pointed out because it makes sense that the guy who wrote some of the best morally gray TV that I've ever seen, of course he wrote some of the most ethically complicated scenes in Clone Wars.
Yeah, and I do wish we got less I'm poisoning children from Almec, because his idea of I'm stimulating the economy, it's through the black market, but Mandalore is going to starve otherwise, makes sense. And I think we talked about this at the time of those episodes, but yeah, they don't mention the you sold poison to children, which is nice in this. Right. And he does acknowledge the people I know I've made some mistakes in the past, but it was Pre-Vizsla's wish that I come and help you guys. I forget how he phrases it exactly, but he does sort of acknowledge
it was his dying wish that I become prime minister again.
Yeah, which is okay, normally we don't elect officials based on the dying wishes of other folks, but sure, why not?
Yeah.
But yeah,
let's chant his name.
I mean, I feel like if Olmec had any Force abilities, he would be a Sith. Like, he's clearly very good at politics. He's very good at manipulation.
Yeah, well, maybe not necessarily a Sith, but definitely, like, if he had his druthers, I think he would be working with the Separatists and doing the sort of same political machinations on maybe a slightly less grand scale than Palpatine.
Right. For sure. All right, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up, unless either of you have anything else.
Mandalore. No, I got nothing. Riki?
Mandalorians.
Are you gonna Kenobi, even though... We got a good Kenobi from Maul, even though he doesn't have Grievous. It's a different Kenobi.
Not the same. No Grievous, no Roger.
Yeah, no Roger was nice. You mentioned very few droids, except like some medical droids. Mm-hmm. Yep. Which may be a refreshing palate cleanser from the last arc.
I think no Anakin at all, was there?
I don't think so. If there was, the only time he would have been is when they were discussing at the Jedi Temple whether or not they should go help. Mm-hmm. And then...
I don't think he had a line.
Yeah, I don't think so. He might have just been standing in the background. But, yeah. And I also... the Jedi invoking their version...
BS Prime Directive.
Yeah, I was going to say their version of the Prime Directive when it, like, makes sense for them is kind of annoying, but it also seems very on brand. It's like, oh, well, too bad they're neutral, otherwise we could help them. Mm-hmm. It's like, you went and helped a separatist army overthrow their oppressors under the guise of, like, we're not actually fighting the war, we're just hanging out and teaching them some skills. Right, I'm sure you could have gone. Yeah, military advisors. It's fine. But anyway.
Yeah. I actually don't get it. And here we go off on a tangent right at the end.
No,
but
go for it.
Again, Mandalore is still a part of the Republic. Is a member of the Republic. Mm-hmm. They should be able to petition for help against foreign invaders, right? Like,
yeah,
I so they're like trying to draw this line that Death Watch is Mandalorian, so they're not foreign.
Yeah, and I think it's entirely them, like, sticking it to Mandalore in their very, like, passive-aggressive, politically savvy kind of way. They're just like, well, they're neutral. They won't side with us, so we can't help them. Darn.
It's interesting. I kind of went into a kind of understanding where the Jedi are coming from, but you have me convinced that the Jedi are basically running a protection racket here. Like, like, it's a nice planet. It's a shame what Death Watch is doing to it, but you didn't pay the VIG, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of understand the Jedi's position of... Because I think, like, it's not clear to them that, what actually is happening, and that it does seem like it's an internal conflict between two Mandalorian groups, and so is it their job to intervene? Yeah. But you're right, it's definitely something that they apply selectively, and I think that they are clearly all very bitter, and I think this is kind of the... we've talked about how one of the overall themes of this is the fall of the Jedi, and that part of that's because of their pride and their arrogance, their hubris. And I think there's kind of a wounded pride of like, what do you mean you don't want to be part of our gang? What do you mean you don't want our protection? Oh, now you want our protection? Well, F you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I mean, they are, like, highly bureaucratic, and I think they can maybe even fool themselves into thinking that, like, oh, well, we're just tied up in all this bureaucracy and we have to follow the rules. But... Right. Like, they don't necessarily break the rules, but they manipulate the rules to their advantage when it suits them.
I think it's very fair. All right, well, I think that's a good wrapping up point, so thank you guys so much. As always, fans, what did you think of these episodes? We'd love to hear from you. I love getting emails, love getting Facebook messages, tweets. Continue these conversations with us. That's the whole point of this. We love talking about it. We want to talk to you about it. You can find us on Facebook or on Twitter at The Ethical Panda. You can also email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. Ethical Panda is kind of the overarching podcast group for the podcasts I do, both this and Superhero Ethics, as well as some others I sometimes guest on. You can also find all of my podcasts, as well as a bunch of other great ones, on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network, which is strandedpanda.com. There you'll find podcasts about the MCU, DC, Star Trek, all sorts of other great stuff. So please check all those out. If you like these podcasts, the best thing you can do is help other people find them. If you'd go to iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts, write a review for us, hopefully a 5-star review, but whatever you need to say, please do that. Leave us a review, let people know what you think of the episode, and share this with your friends. The way I know most of the podcasts I listen to, it's because someone was like, hey, I know you love this topic. You should check out this podcast. If you know other Star Wars friends, if you know other people you think would like these conversations, share this podcast with them. It's a great way to help grow the network, great way to support us, and a great way to just, add more to the conversation. So on behalf of myself, Sarah, Riki, thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Kenobi.
There it is.
That was my
That was
attempted
your
mall.
Kenobi?